What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. Chris Pinnell here, and happy Thanksgiving. Hope you guys have a fantastic holidays filled with family, friends, football, and whatever else you want to fill it with. Doesn't matter to me. But we're here breaking down the 3-game Turkey Day slate that we have over on DraftKings and FanDuel. And if you enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. Let's dive right into it. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position, and it's a bit different this week. We usually have 9 to 12 games, so the quarterback spread can be quite large. Although this week, with 3 games, that's 6 quarterbacks, and 1 game has a 37.5 point over-under. And those names include guys like Cooper Rush and Tommy DeVito, which DeVito's not even guaranteed to play in this game. It's only Tuesday afternoon, so we'll have more information by Thursday, but it's all I have to work with right now. And Dayball did say he's not 100% confirmed to play this week. So honestly, the quarterback pool is like 4 guys. I might get to some Cooper Rush in 150 max because I do have interest in CeeDee Lamb and Shoemaker if Jake Ferguson is out. So just for stack reasons, I might get to him a little bit just because he's going to be really low and he's cheap. But outside of that, I think we're mainly talking like single entry type contests, 3 maxes, which I'm assuming most people are playing. So that basically leaves us with Caleb Williams, Tua, Jordan Love, and Jared Goff. And the pricing on this slate, you can do whatever you want. I was playing around with some hand builds on FanDuel once they released pricing in the contest, and I built a really good Caleb Williams stack, double stack, got some stud running backs in there, and I had almost $3,000 left over still. And there really wasn't much for me to upgrade. Like there's no expensive tight end on this slate. And on DraftKings, it's very soft as well. It's not like we have a Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson on this slate of quarterback where you're thinking about, do I want to spend this $8,000, $9,000? No, we have $6,500 on DraftKings and $8,200 on FanDuel for the back. So really you can play whoever you want. So it's kind of fun in that sense, but it also makes it almost difficult because you feel like you want to upgrade some spots when you probably shouldn't, because on a small set like this, you want to correlate your lineups as best as possible, and you want to play for a specific game script, or I guess like a 3-game script. Like, I think this game's going to shoot out, so I completely stack this game, fade the other games. Or if I really like this quarterback, maybe I triple stack, which is not something I would normally do on a larger slate. But, you know, when you have a small slate, things can change for your strategy a little bit. I know we've had a couple of 2-game slates this year on Monday Night Football, and the one I had a nice little takedown, and I had a bunch of Bengals on my team, and it wasn't like a normal lineup that I would have played on a main slate. So your strategy will change a bit. But we'll start with who I think should be the cash game quarterback, and just based off my projections currently, Caleb Williams does have the best point per dollar value. I know Detroit hasn't given up a ton to the quarterback position fantasy points wise, the 6th fewest per game this year, but it's pretty much just for the lack of touchdowns. Only 0.64 per game this year, but they're still giving up 242 yards, which is the most of any team on the slate defensively, 15.2. And Caleb Williams hasn't run the ball a little bit. Decent games back to back. Obviously had a huge game. I believe that was last week versus Minnesota. And if he's going to run the ball a little bit at $5,300, and his stacking options look good, and Detroit is not good versus the wide receiver position. So if you want to play Caleb Williams at $5,300, only 72 on FanDuel. He's averaging 30 rushing yards per game so far this year. We saw him get up to 70. I believe that was 2 weeks ago, if I remember correctly. But either way, DJ Moore, big game last week. Keenan Allen had a couple of really nice catches. Rome Odunze, I mean, all these guys are getting targeted. This offense is very concentrated where the ball goes through the air. So it's really easy to stack with him. I'm not saying you should triple stack, but that's something you could certainly do with Caleb on a small slate like this. They're 10-point dogs on the road. They'll be playing from behind. I know the implied team total is a little bit lower here, but this is the highest over-under on the slate, just edging out the Green Bay and Miami game. So Caleb Williams is projecting really well at his price point. I'm not saying he's the clear-cut best play quarterback, but point per dollar wise, he looks pretty good. After that, we have Jared Goff on the flip side of this game. Obviously, if you want to stack with him, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams. We'll see what happens with Cleve Raymond, but Tim Patrick, I wouldn't mind either. Sam Laporta, he's cheap. I know some of his pass catching options are a little bit more expensive, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, but like I said, pricing is very easy to get by this week. And none of these quarterbacks really have great matchups. Like for the Chicago Bears, they're allowing the 3rd fewest points per game to quarterbacks. Miami Dolphins are allowing the 2nd fewest points per game to quarterbacks for Jordan Love. And then Green Bay is allowing the 6th fewest as well, tied with Detroit for Tua. So it's not like anybody's really in a smash spot here, but you have to play somebody. So just pick a stack, roll with it, and hopefully that's the high scoring team. But they do have a 30.5 implied team total, which is the best on the board. And Detroit just, they cheat at home. They're just so good. If we pull up the stacks chart here, which you guys can get access to, including the entire NFL model, which I do stat out the entire slate for every player, every position that should be relevant for fantasy. And then optimize ownership projection, cheat sheet, go over cash games, tournaments, all that good stuff you can find at a link down below in the description. But if we're just looking at the stack projections, which again, these are early, so they can change a little bit, they can fluctuate. But if you're looking at Detroit, obviously the best implied team total and the best overall quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end projection on the entire slate. But what does look interesting here is this Green Bay numbers, because they are about $1,000 cheaper. Their implied team total is not as great, but they're still playing at home, 25.5 implied team total. It's fine. But if you're looking at their overall projections, I mean, they really aren't that far off of Detroit. And then in some aspects, they actually project a little bit better. We'll have to see what happens with Romeo Doubs. If he happens to be out, that's obviously an upgrade to guys like Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Tavian Wicks, I guess Bo Melton or Malik Heath. And then Josh Jacobs was an absolute workhorse versus the 49ers. But I think Green Bay looks really good here. So I have absolutely no issues with that whatsoever. And they're definitely going to be a team that I am targeting. Jordan Love throws touchdowns every single week. I'm not sure who it's going to be to a lot of times because it's a really spread out offense. But I mean, take your picks here. And if you want to triple stack, double stack with Jordan Love, that's really easy to do. You can still play Josh Jacobs. Like, not normal rules don't exactly apply to these smaller slates. Tua, on the other hand, when he plays in the cold, I don't know, his numbers just really take a dip. I remember seeing a stat on that. I don't have it pulled up, and obviously that's something you really can't quantify too well, but Miami's projections across the board aren't looking exactly as great. Devon Chan's always going to be in play. We'll talk about running backs here, so I don't want to get too in depth, but for me, Green Bay, Chicago, Detroit are probably the teams that I'm going to be trying to get to the most. And then I don't mind some pieces on the Dallas Cowboys, but we'll talk more about that individually at running back and wide receiver. All right, moving over to the build. Like I always say, guys, we're just trying to go through a process of how I'd build a single entry, 3 max type of build. This is not a million maker type of thing, and this is not for you guys to use. It's just showing the process I would use. You can apply it to your own favorite plays and use it in a similar way. That makes sense. Let's grab a quarterback here. There's really 4 I like. I don't mind Cooper Rush. We could look into a touchdown, maybe 2 if we're just extremely lucky and the Giants fall asleep on defense. So I'm not ruling out Cooper Rush. Tommy DeVito, whoever the Giants quarterback is, I probably am not going to get to at all. So it's really a 5-man pull for me, 4.5. But let's roll with Caleb Williams here at $5,300. Sounds fun, easy stacking options, and move on to running back. And for such a small slate, it's honestly not a bad running back pool. I think a lot of people will start just looking specifically at the Detroit Lions running backs. I mean, these guys score touchdowns every single week. They both get there. It seems like every single week, both are very productive. Both get plenty of opportunities. If you're looking at their exact opportunities per game this year, we have Jahmyr Gibbs sitting at 17.6, David Montgomery at 15.6. Obviously, Gibbs is a little bit more dynamic, can be used in the passing game, but David Montgomery is also used in the passing game. He's getting 2.4 targets per game at 22 receiving yards. Jahmyr Gibbs is at 27 receiving yards, 3.6 targets. So honestly, it's really not that far off. Jahmyr Gibbs is the better running back, in my opinion, 5.8 yards per carry. David Montgomery's at 4.4, but he's using short yardage. He can get the touchdowns. I mean, both these guys are absolutely incredible. If you want to play them in the same lineup, I don't even think that's crazy either. Again, it's a small slate. You don't have to do typical rules. Then after that, actually the guy I think will probably end up being the highest owned running back on the slate is Josh Jacobs, coming off a monster game versus the 49ers at home. 3 touchdowns, over 100 total yards, got the rushing bonus. Second highest implied team total on the slate, playing at home versus Miami, who's used to warm weather. He's actually getting the most opportunities per game this year at over 21 of any running back on this slate specifically. And there's really no reason not to like Josh Jacobs. If you're playing cash games, he'd be the guy I start with, and then take your pick at really any Detroit running back. And all these guys are viable. I mean, Devon Chan, he's been much, much better when Tua is under center. He's using the passing game a lot, 15.9% target share, 5 targets per game. He also used on the ground as well, and he's been scoring touchdowns, got into the end zone twice last week. Wasn't a very efficient game overall, but the touchdowns got there, and Miami will have an opportunity at some point. But I mean, for the price point, I am preferring guys like Gibbs, Jacobs, Montgomery just a little bit more over Devon Chan. That's not to say I won't get exposure to him, but like on a site on FanDuel at $9,000, I mean, Dave Montgomery's $1,500 cheaper. Jacobs is $1,200 cheaper. It's a little bit easier to get to those guys on the blue side compared to DraftKings, where it's a little bit more tight instead of spread out. Then DeAndre Swift, Tyrone Tracy, they're more so tournament options. I am not going to be going too overboard here. I know DeAndre Swift hasn't exactly been awful this year. I mean, he's getting the opportunities at nearly 20 per game, 18.9, but it's a brutal matchup as a running back versus Detroit. They're on the second fewest points per game. They've been good versus the run for the past couple of seasons now. And with them being 10-point dogs, sure, he could get more dump offs, but I don't think this is a great DeAndre Swift spot. And I'm just kind of concerned about Tyrone Tracy and the Giants offense in general. Like, I just don't really think there's a ton of upside there. But Rico Dowdle is a guy that I do like. He got plenty of opportunity last week. They have a 21.5 implied team total, which is actually better than the Bears. And it's only a 1 point worse than the Miami Dolphins. and he's only $5,500. He's $6,100 on FanDuel. He makes things fit, and I don't mind it here versus the Giants. Their run defense has not been that great this year. They're allowing over 100 rushing yards per game, and they're allowing the 5th most points per game, specifically to fantasy running backs. So if you're looking for a value running back, I mean, Rico Dowdle does seem like the best option. All right, let's get a couple of running backs here. Since I'm going with Caleb Williams, I'm going to grab a couple of pass catchers. I'm just going to stack this game up really. So I'll just grab one of the Detroit running backs here. We'll go with Jahmyr Gibbs, $3,500, and then we'll play Josh Jacobs. I know he's going to be extremely chalky, but I mean, it's a small slate. I'll try to get different elsewhere, I guess, somewhere. I'm not sure where yet, but we'll figure it out. And the wide receiver is pretty wide open. Now, there's a couple of injury situations we'll have to keep an eye on. First one would be Romeo Doubs. If he happens to be out, it does concentrate the Green Bay passing attack a little bit more. So instead of 4 guys, 5 guys, it slims it down. So Jaden Reed would obviously get a bump. Christian Watson, Tavian Wicks, all those guys would get a slight bump. And I'm kind of assuming he's going to be out. If he happens to play, I mean, great. He's just another option, but I do think it's unlikely at this point that he would play. Did not practice on Monday. And I mean, concussions these days, it's hard to get activated by a Thursday game when it happens on a Sunday. Then other than that, we're kind of looking at stacking options. Like if I'm playing Jared Goff, it's a small slate. How is Jared Goff scoring points, and how am I going to win with Jared Goff on a small slate if his wide receivers don't go off? Or also Sam Laporta. When I say receiver, I don't specifically mean wide receiver. I mean anybody that can catch the ball from him. Like maybe Jahmyr Gibbs catches 2 touchdowns. That's a very unlikely scenario. So I'm playing Jared Goff, Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Come on down. You're going to enter my lineup. Now, I want to mention that the Jameson Williams price point on FanDuel, he's $5,700. That's something I have a lot of interest in over there. I mean, the way Tyreek Hill's been playing, they got pretty similar upside, and he's about $2,000 cheaper. So that's definitely a point of interest for me, whether it be cash games or tournaments. JMO, big play upside, and he's been getting consistent targets. And also Khalif Raymond, which I know is not a big factor in that offense. There's a chance he could be out. He left with an injury, which does help at least condense the targets a little bit. I know he barely gets anything, but just something to point out. If I am playing Cooper Rush is probably not going to be optimal naked. So CeeDee Lamb, outside of CeeDee Lamb at the wide receiver position, Dallas doesn't really have much these days, but you could look at Schoonmaker, assuming Ferguson is out. But I think you guys get that. I really don't want to break this down too much because, I mean, I don't care about wide receiver cornerback matchups. It's just not something that I think is worth. It's just not something I think is worth your time. But I do want to mention for Caleb Williams, I mean, like I said, his wide receivers are just dirt cheap. DJ Moore is 56. Keenan Allen's 51. Rome Odunze, $5,000. And if we're looking at their targets, I mean, Keenan Allen, 26% target share. DJ Moore, 23% target share. Odunze, 20% target share. Detroit's 29th versus wide receivers. This is a great spot for them. They're all so cheap, very easy to stack up, which is why I like Caleb Williams so much. And speaking of them, let's plug a couple of them in our lineups here. So we're looking at DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Odunze. I mean, the targets, I mean, for Keenan Allen, he had 15 last week, 8 the week prior. Rome Odunze has had 10 targets the previous 2 weeks. He's highly involved in this offense still. And then DJ Moore, while the targets are a little bit lower, I still think he's the most talented of the bunch here, and he is coming off a nice game versus the Minnesota Vikings. So we'll just plug in 2. It doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I'm going to completely rotate that around. And you could play all 3. That is one route to go. And if Caleb Williams throws 3 touchdowns, they all happen to catch a touchdown each. He goes for over 300 yards, and they'll get a proportional share of that. I mean, that's something that can work out if you just absolutely hit the jackpot on that game. I'm not saying it's the scenario that's always going to happen, but when you're building for tournaments, you have to build in the sense where, yeah, I'm planning for this to be an outlier game that would work in my favor. So if I'm playing Caleb Williams, I'm not going to not play his receiving options to try to hedge out of myself, where if Caleb Williams has a bad game, well, at least all my other wide receivers might not get sunk down with him. I don't want to play a tournament like that because then we're just kind of hoping for a min cash at that point. I'm hoping to get that nice outlier outcome where if Caleb Williams throws for 300 yards, all of his pass catchers are going off. It puts us in the upper echelon of our tournament. And of course, on the flip side, if Caleb Williams does end up sucking, which is possible, my receivers are probably going to suck with them, and that's totally fine. That's the risk you run in tournaments. Sometimes it's your week, sometimes it is not. Let's just throw another one in here. We have Keenan or Odunze. I mean, I think Keenan probably ends up being a little bit higher owned, so we'll just run with Odunze there. And there's really not much for me to say at tight end. It's really lame. We have like 5 viable guys that start. We'll see what happens with the New York tight ends, but I don't have any interest there. So we have Shoemaker, Komet, Kraft, Laporta, Jonnu Smith. I mean, I guess the first priority would be who's my quarterback, and then I correlate if possible. If not, I mean, Jonnu Smith seems like the cash tight end. He's the most involved tight end in his offense. 18.5% target share, running routes at a 63% clip. Nearly 4.5 catches per game on 6 targets, 50 receiving yards. And if being a colder game in Green Bay, I mean, maybe that's where too his safety valve ends up being. I mean, trying to talk myself into one of these guys, but no one really looks that good. Sam Laporte on a team that scores a lot of points. The touchdown equity is there. Now he's taking a big step back this year, but when you have a 30.5 implied team total, I mean, you might just get into the end zone. Tucker Kraft, if Jaden Reed is out, that's a bit of a bump, but not like it's extreme. Cole Kmet, like, there's just not much to say about it. All these guys average around 40 receiving yards, 2.5 to 4 catches. I mean, there's just, if anyone's sitting here telling you there's an absolute smash play at tight end, I would say they're probably lying to you. Schoonmaker, it looks like Ferguson's a long shot to play, so he'll once again be the tight end 1. He did very well last week if you played him on the main slate at min price. But the price is up this time. He's $200 cheaper than Kmet, not even $1,000 cheaper than Sam Laporta or Jonnu Smith. So it's not like he's the screaming value he was last time. So it's really just a mix and match party. Jonnu Smith's the cash tight end, but outside of that, like I said, just correlate the best you can with your quarterback. And then for defense, I don't normally talk about them, but since this is such a small slate, besides the Bears, anybody's in play. Like the Dolphins don't look like a good play at defense, but all it takes is one strip sack, scoop and score, and they're optimal on a small slate like this. So you can't just exclude a defense. I will be playing the Bears on the road in Detroit with 30.5 implied team total. I'm gonna pass on that, but Cowboys and Giants would be the preferred two. Lowest implied team totals, lowest over under. Two pretty bad quarterbacks. I would prefer Dallas playing at home. They have the lowest implied team total against them, but either way, I'm fine with it. All right, back to the lineup here. We have 4 spots left, just under $5,000 to do it. Pricing, I don't see it really being an issue. So let's just cross off the defense here. We'll play the Cowboys, $31. That's the preferred defense. Puts us at 5,500. We could get one of these Detroit wide receivers just as a run back option. I know we already have Jahmyr Gibbs, but if we're just going to hope this game ends up popping off for 50, 60 points. That would be ideal for this specific lineup. So we'll throw in Jameson Williams. Probably not going to be able to afford Amon-Ra St. Brown. Put you at 42. I mean, you could do it, but it would take like playing a Tucker Kraft and then a flex, you'd have $4,800, which not exactly my favorite range. Maybe if Romeo Doubs played, that wouldn't look too bad. But we'll go with a cheaper option here. We'll just go to the cheaper Detroit wide receiver, and we'll end up playing Jameson Williams at $6,100. Like on my FanDuel, especially at this price point, but on DraftKings, he's pretty easy to fit as well. Puts us at 52. We could just play the best tight end here, Jonnu Smith, and then $6,100. That leaves us with guys like DeAndre Swift, which I don't like for my specific build. Tyrone Tracy, Jaden Reed is an awesome play, especially if Romeo Doubs is out. And Rico Dowdle, we already have the Cowboys defense. That wouldn't be a bad correlation play just to pair up the running back and defense. And he was highly involved last week, 19 carries, had 3 targets. That's over 20 opportunities. I mean, we'll take that. It's a good matchup versus the Giants, but I'll leave it open for your imagination. But overall, the roster construction for this build looks pretty good. We have Caleb Williams double stack with DJ Moore, Rome Odunze. We have a ran back with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams for that game stack. Plugging in Josh Jacobs, seems like the safest running back on the board here. And Jonnu Smith was the plug-in, Dallas defense, and then your imagination. But overall, the roster construction makeup of this build is pretty solid. And like always, just run the optimizer here to see which players are popping up. Now, it is Tuesday, so some projections and situations could end up changing, but this is what we have to work with right now. So you could make a tight end ineligible on these smaller slates. That's not something I exactly do. I do it on main slates because I typically don't want to go double tight end. Let's just throw in a little bit of randomness here, so we're not using exact projections. You could do a max from team, like on a small set like this. Sometimes you just get way too many players from a single team, so if you wanted to make that 3 or 4, you could. But just to make this quicker and simple, let's just do some quick stacks here. Like quarterback with wide receiver and tight end. I'm not going to specify which teams, but you could certainly do that if you want to. We'll click save, and we'll run a quick 20 max. And we got it in here. Took out the ownership projections for now. We'll see which players are populating a ton, but yeah, a lot of Josh Jacobs, a lot of Jaden Reed. I believe I have Romeo Doubs projected currently out, so obviously if he's in, I'm sure that would change a little bit, but tons of CD Lamb, Jonnu Smith, DJ Moore, Giants, Tucker Kraft, Juwan Chan. Yeah, not surprised by that. Okay, Caleb Williams and Jordan Love, both quarterbacks getting an equal amount of exposure here. We're just getting absolutely jammed in compared to anybody else. And I am expecting them, I believe, to be the 2 highest owned quarterbacks. Either Jared Goff might be able to pop in, but I currently have Caleb Williams projected to be the highest, but that could change by Thursday here. So let's look at a Jordan Love lineup because we've talked a lot about Caleb, but I'm kind of seeing which ones that looks like here. So we have Jordan Love paired with Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, and Tucker Kraft. So we have a 3-man stack with that. And we also have Josh Jacobs in this build. So that's 4 Packers. Dave Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, double Detroit Lions running back. DJ Moore mixed in there, Giants defense. I mean, for a main slate, this would be crazy, but for such a small slate like this, I think that is perfectly fine if we're looking at which teams are getting jammed in the most. Green Bay, Dallas, Miami, Chicago, Detroit. Detroit, not so much, but I think it's just because for these Bills, I'm not playing with my exposure. And if it's giving me so much Caleb Williams, so much Jordan Love, it's filtering to those kind of players first rather than the Detroit wide receivers or pass catchers. That's one thing you kind of have to keep in mind. But overall, I'm not overly surprised about the other players we are seeing mixed in here. Like for this Caleb Williams build, you have DJ Moore mixed in there, and that is just it. If you wanted to force at least 2, you could do that, but I didn't do it for that quick run right there. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. I'm more than happy to answer them. I wish you all the best. Hopefully you have a fantastic Thanksgiving, and I'll see you all on Saturday.